Welcome to The Critical Path, Greater Vancouver Realtors' professionalism and innovation-focused podcast. I'm your host, Jesse Lalime. Each episode, we sit down with industry leaders to discuss the critical issues affecting our profession and the paths we must take to overcome them. And we're going to keep it short to start today because we've got the head of our regulator, the BC Financial Services Authority, or BCFSA, Tolga Yalkin, in the studio. There's a lot to get into because BCFSA is preparing to release a major discussion paper called Strengthening Consumer Confidence. It might have already been released by the time you're hearing this. Tolga's taken some time today to go through the discussion paper with us. So without further ado, Tolga, welcome to The Critical Path.
Thanks, Jesse. It's great to be here. It's
great to be here on this lovely January day. Late June and cloudy and rainy is always fun, but I digress. We've got a lot to talk about here today. And, you know, the discussion paper, as I mentioned, it's pretty meaty. But before we get into that, I just wanted to first start with a quick chat about your new service center. We've heard from our members about frustrations in the past, trying to get in touch with us, be it delays, confusion about who to contact, feeling bounced around. Part of that was what led to our Service Reimagined initiative, which is aimed at creating a faster, more responsive experience. And it seemed like with your new service center, BCFSA saw a similar opportunity. So maybe just tell us a little bit about how that came about. And I think it was released in April, if I'm not correct. So how's it been going?
Yeah, that's correct, Jesse. It was launched, I believe, April 15th, if I'm not mistaken. I joined the organization, as you know, relatively recently. So I had the benefit of getting to hear from folks around some of the different initiatives that were in flight, including the service center when I joined. And one of the things that they told me is it sounds very similar to your Service Reimagined experience, where when folks reached out to us with questions, often they were confused about the process. There were delays in them being able to get the responses that they were looking for. And often the responses maybe weren't exactly on point in terms of what they hoped to understand better. And that, I think, really was the impetus for the service center. And it's really, I think, obviously not a world-changing or groundbreaking initiative, but I think it's a really incremental reflection of the importance that we place as a regulatory authority in ensuring that those folks that we regulate have the answers that they need to do their jobs right. It's been the implementation of it, I think, has been definitely a learning experience for us. We've been increasingly improving our approach to fine-tuning how we go about serving folks who reach out to us. But as it stands now, we're getting, I think, about 550 to 600 calls a week. We answer, I'd say, about 90% of those within about 2 minutes. So sometimes folks have to wait a little while, but you get a live person on the other side of the line to be able to help you figure out how to answer your question. We're also receiving, I think, still about 200 emails a week as well too. So I really see those metrics as a reflection of the value I hope that people see. The advice and the information that we can provide. And I know I speak for my colleagues as well, too, when I say I look forward to continuing to figure out how we can increasingly fine-tune this service to professionals to support them in their work.
It's such an ongoing thing, right? Because people are so different and they really do prefer to reach out and receive service in different ways, right? So understanding that is definitely been a big part of our journey as well. So it's neat to kind of learn it's not necessarily learning on the fly, but it is learning as you go almost in a way, right?
Yeah, it's an interesting point, Jesse. And another, building on that, I'd say, we currently live in an environment where with a lot of these, what would have otherwise have been sort of human touch points, that a lot of organizations are replacing those with chat bots and phone systems and whatnot. And I was really heartened when I arrived at BCFSA to see that, yes, we're certainly trying to figure out how we can leverage technology, but it's really leveraging technology to figure out how we can augment that human connection that I think folks are really looking for when they have questions, right? They want to talk to someone. They want to not only get the information that they need as quickly as possible, but also make sure that folks understand the issues that they're raising. And I think really that human connection is really critical for facilitating that.
That human connection is also a huge part of what our members do, right? In real estate and helping people, through a very critical time in their life, which is often referred to as, the biggest purchase you'll ever make when you're buying a home. So, with that, let's get into strengthening consumer confidence a little bit. This podcast, as I mentioned, is, going to probably be coming out just before or just as BCFSA is releasing this discussion paper. There's a lot of bold, much needed ideas in there. And before we really start digging in, I just wonder if maybe you can set the stage for us a little bit. What's behind the paper? Why the timing perhaps? Why is BCFSA seeking these changes, and what's the hope for coming out of it?
Yeah, those are great questions. I'd say the impetus for some of these changes goes back to way back to 2021. That was a time when we undertook a consultation, and we received a lot of good submissions, a lot of good ideas in terms of how we could support both industry and also consumers in navigating some of the challenges that may be faced. And some of those we implemented, right? Some of those actually resulted in policy changes. But I think that 2021 consultation that we did really indicated to us that there's a broader appetite for additional change, obviously measured and careful change, but a broader appetite for additional change. And so really what we've done in this most recent consultation is we've tried to identify what do we think some of those really sort of key, valuable changes could be and could be brought forward for consideration. And we're putting them out there to folks to get their feedback, to see what they think, so that we can figure out what might be a practical approach to navigating some of these issues as we move forward.
So let's just dive right in. The first big proposal is talking about making the offer process more transparent, which is something we've been working at for a while now. This is specifically looking at handling multiple offers, which, especially when the market is hot, maybe, it's not as much of an issue now, but, it can be a real challenge. We've seen attempts over the years to kind of help, but the issue kind of keeps coming around. Talk a little bit about what exactly BCFA is proposing on this, and how is it different than what's been tried before?
Yeah, happy to do that. You raise a really interesting point, though, in your question, which just jumped out at me, which is, certainly the market dynamics right now are a little bit different than maybe what had been experienced in some previous years. But I actually think that provides us a really great opportunity to make very rational, careful decisions about how we continue to evolve our regulatory framework. And so I would just say, your question really prompted and reminded me that despite the fact that we're not in a situation where there may be as frequently multiple offers and really fast-moving deals, maybe that's a great time for us to be thinking about this stuff so that we're setting down a foundation now for what may come in the future.
A less pressured environment, kind of.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah. But just specifically on, what the kind of thinking and the ideas are, as you kind of, your question alluded to, when we are in a fast-moving market, when there are multiple offers, when those go to multiple rounds of offers being made, that can sometimes lead to unintended outcomes. Like a really good example of that is, a buyer in the absence of information may think that they have to offer a higher price than they would otherwise have to offer to be able to obtain a property because of obviously the different information that they have or that they don't have in terms of what is actually happening. And this is a bit of it's a complicated landscape to navigate, right? Because on the one hand, there's fiduciary duties and the requirements, obviously, of agents to maintain information that is in their client's interests confidential. On the other hand, there's this sense that we have to figure out how to share information in an appropriate way between the parties to a transaction to make sure that they're able to make rational and wise decisions. And so some of the things we're kind of thinking about when it comes to that multiple offer type situation is, if there are multiple rounds of offers being made, when you go to the next round, maybe it would be important for the listing agent to be required to disclose the highest offer of those last offers that were received, so that the potential buyers who may be interested in putting on a higher bid have a bit of a sense as to where they may need to go in order to be able to secure the property. Another idea that we have, which is it's a little bit different. It's a post-closing idea, but just to ensure that there's an incentive for folks to align their behavior with what might be reasonable expectations of conduct in the context of these situations, and also just transparently disclose at the end of a transaction what actually transpired. There's a proposal to require the listing agent to disclose, obviously anonymized, so not providing any names to the figures themselves, but just to disclose the dollar figure of those other offers that were made over the course of the transaction. And this is just kind of in a sense, like a good housekeeping measure, which could ensure that in some contexts, that people are conducting themselves in accordance with their obligations.
Well, and some goodwill too, right? To be able to show your client where, for lack of a better term, where they finished in the bidding, right? And, like you said, it gives them a better idea too about where they might need to go if, it gets into another round of bidding and they're really interested in the property and they need to know where their bid should be to be competitive. Another big proposal is around written service agreements. And as far as I knew, that was still pretty rare for agents to have formal agreements with buyers. What exactly are you proposing here? And more importantly, how is it intended to strengthen consumer confidence in the process?
Yeah, again, it's a great question. So, written service agreements, I think the benefit that they offer to buyers is that they do a few things, right? Like the one thing is that they clearly communicate to a buyer that they are in a relationship with a professional, that they can expect certain services from them. Often they set out particular times within which those services will be rendered to them as well too, so that people understand clearly when agreement starts and when it ends, and obviously it could be renewed thereafter as well too. So it makes sure that people are clear that when they engage a real estate professional, that they have an expectation about what sort of services that they're going to receive from them, the nature of the relationship that they're going to benefit from, the duties that they have with respect to them as well too, but also an opportunity to be a little bit more clear, I think, about the financial nature of the transaction, specifically around commissions, right? So just letting buyers know who may not be completely aware that when you engage a real estate professional to represent you, that you are also agreeing to a certain commission structure, obviously subject to whatever the listing is offering, but just so that the buyer is really transparent and clear in terms of what sort of compensation and remuneration the buying agent will receive as a consequence of acting on their behalf.
Because you mentioned when we talked about kind of setting the stage for this, some of what's already out there now, and like in particular, like the DORTs and some of those things are some things that have kind of already come from the early parts of this discussion, right? So this is kind of looking at maybe an expansion of that a little bit, correct?
Yeah, and it could be like, we're not predetermining what the actual vehicle is for kind of giving effect to this this view that we have, that I think clear agreements could be helpful. It could be a standalone agreement. It could be enhancements to the existing DORT. So, I think we can think more about that and think what the pros and cons would be. And obviously, I think that's one of the benefits of engaging in a consultation like this, because we get to hear directly from folks on not only what do you think about in principle of the idea, but what might be the best way, if we all agree it makes sense, to go about actually putting it into practice.
I was just going to say that's a cue for our listeners that when this stuff comes out, please make sure you're responding and sending your feedback in, because this is, as Tolga's saying, stuff that, they want to work through and consider, every option, right?
Absolutely.
The next proposal is on a topic that's always a little bit touchy, especially when it comes to public perception. And you were just talking about it, compensation practices. Realtors provide a valuable service and deserve to be compensated fairly, but there is a need to strike the right balance between fair compensation and consumer protection, making sure that they're paying, for what they're getting. talk a little bit more about what's being proposed in that kind of field, in that area.
Yeah. First of all, I think like any professional, real estate licensees will expect adequate and appropriate compensation for the services that they render their clients. I don't think anybody will disagree with that. I guess the two things that I think are interesting to reflect on is just one, and we sort of discussed it a little bit already, is this idea of clarity of folks in terms of what the compensation is, under what circumstances it will be received, what sort of what ultimately it amounts to in terms of like a quantum or a percentage. And I think that disclosure is important. So thinking about how we ensure that everybody understands very clearly what the compensation is that is going to be received and under what circumstances. So I think that's the first thing. The second thing I'll say is when we think about compensation, we do think about transparency and disclosure, certainly, but we also think really, I think, in a focused way about how do we ensure that the way in which compensation is structured helps, for example, real estate professionals give effect to the fiduciary duties that they have for their clients? How does it align with that fiduciary duty? And right now, there are some constraints on how compensation can be structured for real estate professionals. And so one of the things we're thinking about, just as an example, is, is there a world in which, for example, if you are a buyer's agent, right, and you're trying to secure a particular property for them, and you were able to get the property, say, $50,000 under asking, is there a way that you can be compensated and incentivized for being able to use your negotiating skills, your knowledge, your capabilities to be able to obtain a better price for your client? Right now, that's not possible, but it might be interesting for us to think about a world in which it would be.
Almost like a bonus kind of or something, right? And I think it gets back to what we're talking about, this being, oftentimes the biggest purchase anybody will ever make. I think, there's nothing a client would appreciate more than, the clarity around where that compensation structure fits into the overall picture of what they're doing, right?
And I'd also say
more
the
informed
ability
decisions, right?
More informed decisions, and then on the issue of different approaches to compensation, also the ability to incentivize your agent to be able to, really push on your behalf to be able to say, get a better price, right? Than otherwise you would be able to do based on the current approach.
Another proposal in the paper is, you mentioned the fiduciary duties, right? When we're talking about some of those constraints, and specifically suggesting that agents should no longer be able to modify any of their fiduciary duties except where it's necessary to comply with other rules. So dig into that, because I wasn't fully aware that agents could modify those duties in the first place. What exactly is open to being changed under the current framework, and what are we trying to kind of address with it?
Yeah, it's a great question, Jesse. And also, I'm not surprised that you're not aware that it's possible to modify your fiduciary duties, because a lot of people, when they think about being a fiduciary, really the idea is pretty fundamental, right? It's like
pretty straightforward.
I act in your interests. Like, your interests are my interests, and I'm trying my best to advance them no matter what, right? And so there is currently flexibility in terms of the ability of agents to modify or tailor or constrain the nature of those fiduciary obligations for their clients. And so one of the things that we think might be useful is to give a little bit of thought to that. Think about, are there areas where it might not make sense to allow that flexibility? Say when it comes to your duty of loyalty to your client, for example, some pretty basic fundamental table stakes elements of fiduciary duties. So just looking at, like, what are the different components of fiduciary duty that, we think form it? And are there any that we think are pretty sacrosanct that we might say, like, it's not possible? And then to the extent that you do, is there a way in which, we make sure that if you are going to be proposing to your client that they agree to you modifying your fiduciary duties to them, that it's absolutely transparent and clear to them what they're agreeing to in doing so?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because again, we keep coming back to this, right? But at the end of the day, this is really all about the consumer and making sure they're feeling kind of protected through this process. But at the same time, like you're saying, finding that balance with, life, right? Life happens, and oftentimes those kind of things come into play. Continuing along, the next proposal looks at the risks tied to unconditional offers. The potential consequences for this, I think, are pretty clear, right? And yet, going back to what we were talking about a few years ago when the market was red hot, and there were maybe more multiple offers around, it felt like almost you had to go unconditional just to stand a chance to get a listing in Vancouver. What's being proposed here to help address this issue?
Yeah, this is another great example of the value of thinking in a really clear-eyed way about these issues when maybe the market isn't as hot and the pressure isn't as high to kind of intervene and do something about it.
And to prepare yourself for when that happens again, right?
Exactly.
I think we all know markets are cyclical and the market will pick up.
Yeah, 100%. So yeah, look, I don't need to explain in detail like some of the risks about unconditional offers because agents will be well familiar with what those are. So the question is, well, okay, if we can imagine a situation where we may be similarly facing buyers facing situations where, like, if they don't come in with an unconditional offer, what position does that put them in? So what are some of the different approaches that we may take from a regulatory perspective to think about how do we at least make sure in such circumstances that everything is kind of crystal clear? Because in a sense also, look, if someone wants to put in an unconditional offer and they feel like they're ready to do that, they're ready to take on the risk, we don't want to stop them from doing that, but we do want to make sure that everything is as clear and transparent to them as possible. So there's kind of a few things that we're thinking may be useful in that respect. The first thing is, as I understand it now, when you put in conditions, there's not a standard form way in which that's done. They're written obviously into the contract, and they're obviously talked about between the buyer's agent and the buyer. But there might be a way in which we can enhance clarity around what are the specific conditions in the actual contract itself. What are the specific conditions? How are they presented? So that folks are able to easily identify, there's a handful of clear, repeated conditions that I could avail myself of if I wanted to, but that also there's a clear way just to strike out those conditions so that people are aware clearly there's this potential condition, but we're striking it out for the purposes of this particular agreement. So that's the first thing that we're kind of thinking about. The second thing that could be also interesting, and I say this with a little bit of trepidation because there's already a lot of forms out there, and that's something that we're concerned about at BCFSA. There's potential form fatigue, and you wonder the extent to which people are actually looking at all of these forms as carefully as we hope that they would. But we're thinking, would it be helpful to have a form where if someone does decide to waive one or more condition, that there's some document from the regulator that allows them to understand in hopefully a very clear, plain language way what the consequences of that decision may be. And again, this is just so that their eyes are wide open, they know what they're going into, they're not under any illusions as to what the implications could be. And the third thing that we're thinking about as well too is, and this is more of an educational piece, that it might be interesting also to have, an annotated standard form contract that we could make available to folks, where if they want to understand and sort of double click on certain elements of it and get a better sense of what some of the implications may be associated with some of the conditions that they may otherwise seek when entering into a sale, that's something else that we're considering as well too, just from that education and awareness perspective.
I think that's really interesting. I think most members would agree, if adding paperwork is never a popular option, but if there was one issue where maybe having some paperwork like that would be really useful and helpful, this would probably be it, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I would tend to agree. I mean, I think there's always room for improvement when it comes to paperwork. So I think, whenever I'm thinking, okay, we're thinking about introducing a new form, maybe we should also look at our existing forms and ask, okay, are these clear? Are they well structured? Are they fit for purpose? But yeah, I agree. I think this is one area where, especially, when you're in a fast moving market, and people are making decisions because they're worried about losing out on an opportunity. I think there's sometimes some clear paperwork that just reminds them of the potentially very significant consequences of some risks that they're deciding to waive their rights to, put a condition in with respect to. It may be worthwhile to introduce another document just to make that clear to them.
And again, just another level of sense of security for the parties involved, right? To be able to kind of have that stuff right in front of them and to be able to see it, to be able to make an informed decision about, yes, I can do this, no, I can't.
Well, it's a great point, right? Like obviously we as a regulator, we're thinking a lot about people, right? Like about consumers, right? Which we often call them, but I just call them people. So we're talking about buyers and sellers and whatnot, and thinking about what information they need. But what is also interesting, in the point that you just raised is it also protects agents as well too, right? In the sense that like
they have something ironclad in paper that they can go back to. Yeah,
absolutely.
Speaking of papers and paperwork, this is kind of the last big piece we were going to get into, and this is about strata documents, and that's been a bit of a bugaboo for members for some time now. They're such a vital part of the decision-making process for buyers, but getting access to them in a timely way can still be a real challenge. I know here at GVR, our rule states that, you have to actually order the strata documents before your listing can go active. But the strata plan itself has to be uploaded within 24 hours of a listing going live. What are some of the elements of what you're proposing when it comes to strata documents?
Yeah, first I'll say I just myself recently closed on a transaction that involves strata documents.
Oh boy!
So I felt the pain personally of reviewing, I think, 150 documents, right, from stem to stern, and that takes time, right? I mean, agents obviously review them as well too, but it takes time to review them, to reflect on them, and to assess like what are potentially some of the concerns or considerations that I may want to be thinking about, before I move forward with this particular deal. And so I think the sooner that folks can have access to those documents, the better, because it creates more time. And so, look, a couple things that I think are, things that would be pretty easy to do, I hope, and relatively valuable would be just requiring the selling agent to have the strata documents ready at the time of listing, which would then mean that the minute that anybody reached out and was ready to move forward, that the strata documents were there, they're ready to go, they're accessible. And hopefully, in a sense, once that process is actually implemented and internalized by industry, it would then actually allow for deals to proceed in a much more fluid way, because many of us have probably been in a situation where, there's discussions ongoing, strata documents waiting for them. They haven't come yet. There's delays, et cetera, et cetera. So hopefully it would be good in a sense for everyone to make sure that there was a clear expectation at the point of listing that those documents would be ready to be provided upon request. The second thing I think that is important, and I think this one is important in a bit of a different way, is that, where, and I'm sure it's relatively rare where this may happen, but to the extent that any updates occur to any of those documents, or there's any additional documents during the course of a particular deal, despite the fact that some documents may have been provided, I think it's a reasonable expectation to say the listing agent needs to provide those in a very timely manner to the potential buyers, because it'd be a real shame, right? If you're thinking about moving forward with a particular property, you're looking at the documents, you're reviewing them, and then you either aren't told that there's an update, or in fact, you get told too late that there's an update, or after the fact. So those are some of the things that we're looking at when it comes to the provision of strata documents.
Mm-hmm. And that makes a ton of sense, right? That kind of more or less gets us to the end of the chat here. So I want to thank you for your time today. This has been a really insightful and important conversation. BCFSA is seeking feedback on all of these proposals that you've heard today. They want to hear from you. They want to hear how this could potentially affect you. They want to hear your ideas for how things might work differently or better. So what's the best way for our members, our listeners, to share their feedback on this proposal?
I mean, the best way is simply to log on to our website, and you'll easily find the consultation and the survey that we provide and the method to provide feedback. And so, yeah, as you said, Jesse, like it'd be great to hear from folks. I've been in this role now for about 6 months. I've had the privilege of getting to go to all of the real estate boards and their AGMs to talk to people. I have a lot of real estate professionals that reach out to me on a regular basis to share their perspectives. And I really do genuinely believe that the strength of the proposals that we come up with really are a reflection of the diversity of perspectives that we were able to collect through these exercises. These are complex issues, right? And nobody has a monopoly on what the best solution is. And a lot depends on effective implementation. And, we as a regulator, we have obviously big perspectives on policy, but I think we really look to industry stakeholders to really get a sense as to how's the rubber going to hit the road on this? Like, how will it work? How could it be achieved? And so, yeah, I would love to invite folks to provide their input into that consultation. And quite frankly, if they have any other views, just share them with us directly.
Do you have any sense of timing for when this might be coming out?
Yeah, so as you said in the opening, we're recording this in June, so we do anticipate that the consultation will be going live in July. That'll be open for a couple months. Don't know exactly the dates, but it'll bleed into September, and so we're really very much looking forward to folks' feedback. And I just say, the value of people providing input into these exercises are so helpful because they are really directional. This is a directional consultation. We're putting some ideas out there. It's not about making the rules just yet, but we really want to get a sense as to what folks think about the merits of some of these ideas and how they ultimately would be implemented. How would the rubber hit the road? And so I'll just say as well, too, to the extent that we actually do pursue any of them and that there are rule changes associated with them, there will be a formal consultation on that specific rule change as well, too. So while I want to encourage everybody to provide their feedback into this consultation, it won't by any means be your last bite at the cherry to be able to provide your views on some of these items.
Mm-hmm. But getting in on the ground floor always helps, right? Because
Definitely.
It's definitely a chance to explore some things that maybe might be a little out of the box, or something a little bit more innovative, which is what we're trying to do on this podcast here. So, Tolga, again, thank you for your time today. We really appreciate you making some time to come down and chat with us.
It was my pleasure being here. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Change is the only constant in life, right? That's never been truer than in BC real estate today. From the structure of organized real estate to the day-to-day practice issues affecting your business, a healthy dialogue with our regulator, the BCFSA, is the critical path our industry must tread to ensure we're part of a healthy future for our profession. Make sure your voice is heard and give your feedback on the consultation paper. Watch for information on how to do so in your inboxes, on BCFSA's website, and on our news blog at membernews.gbrealtors.ca. Thanks for listening. I'm Jesse Lalime, and I'll see you down the next critical path.